I would have been introduced. I'm an associate priest, Sue Cooke, in Stafford, a benefice of 3 churches. And I was ordained just over 4 years ago, at the end of June. And the very first service at which I was asked to serve at the Lord's table, not the altar, we always call it the Lord's table, the very first service, so it was 2 or 3 weeks in, because of course I couldn't administer communion, but I could serve. And my husband, who was really, really proud of the journey I'd done, and I always called it our journey because he was so up for me starting to work again. I'd been retired from teaching for quite a while. And the very first Sunday that I went up to the Lord's table, he followed me. Well, that doesn't sound at all wrong, does it? Except I'd gone up to prepare the table with my incumbent, and my husband shouldn't have come up with me. And I had to turn around and in front of folks, the whole church, and very gently say, Stu, you'll come up in a bit, you don't come up yet. He'd been worshipping with me as a very, very committed Christian for nearly 40 years. And it was a very big moment. I can even remember what he was wearing. The rest of the church would say they hadn't even noticed, and they probably, they'd have dismissed it immediately. But you can understand that I didn't. Stuart's never lost his memory. He is still alive. He's never lost his memory. He's never once repeated himself. He's not done any of the things that the textbooks often say, that's how we recognise dementia. What I started to use to doctors when they would listen, and trust me, they do now, I would say it's a cognitive disconnect. When he performed at 95% of any memory test he took. So I don't blame doctors, believe you me, the NHS has been amazing, but there was a limit to how far they could go because he did so well. But I could see the disconnects, and it was hard to explain them to a medical person because it didn't really make sense. But they happen more and more often, and looking back, I realised that I was taking risks in even, because we live in Trentham, and it's weird when you're non-stipendiary, you then drive nearly half an hour. I'm going to speak to the bishop one day. No, I'm not, please take that bit out. So I had a half-hour drive to church from Trentham to Stafford, and Stuart still worshipped at Trentham Church. And I would lay all his clothes out on the bed in the right order, I would do everything, and then I'd set another alarm, his breakfast was ready, a note with his little tablets, a note to say when I was coming home, and that was as safe as I could make it. And friends at Trentham Church looked after him, they did. But looking back, it was a risk that I was taking, and I wouldn't wish that risk taking on anybody, even though I don't think at the time I recognised it. But it did get worse and worse. And then eventually Stuart went to the memory clinic because I'd taken him to, we'd gone privately in the end because I wasn't being understood because he kept getting 95% in his memory test. If you've ever prayed for somebody to get 20% in a memory test, believe you me, you're in good company. But the chap at the Lichfield did say, there's a problem. He said, I never ever want you to use the word dementia in front of him. And I think that's a lesson for us all to learn, actually, that if a dementia person has forgotten they've got dementia, they don't need reminding of it by the person they love the most. So he said, I was to never use the word, but he did say, I think Stuart's got Alzheimer's. So I'm going to send you back to the memory clinic. Oh my goodness. That was a very expensive private consultation. We were going to go back to the memory clinic. But finally the consultant there did listen to me, and even though Stuart still got over 90, he understood that this was a different sort. And so as a family, the children don't pray. I wish they did. I think they will come to know the Lord through all of this. But even then, they say now they prayed that Dad had Alzheimer's. So we went on a Friday, January the 17th, 2024. And our eldest son came with us, and Matt's a very, very tough policeman. And he held our hands as we went in, and Matt and I were desperate for this, just to give us this diagnosis of Alzheimer's, because we knew then if I pushed hard enough, the tablets would be there on the Monday that could help us. That was bonkers, of course I couldn't, but I'll do anything to move stones now. And we got vascular dementia back. Our Stuart didn't know the difference, because we didn't talk about dementia. Within 15 minutes, the consultant, who was really good, really kind, the only help he could offer us, the only help, was to eat more greens. Because we did everything already. We had a healthy diet, a healthy way of living. Stuart didn't drink, he didn't smoke, and we had a lot of exercise and stuff. So to be told, the only thing I can do is tell you to eat more greens. And that poor man, he's in the nursing home now. If you said he looked like a stick of broccoli, he could do, because he'd never been given so much broccoli in all his life. And I got really angry. There's no point in me saying I didn't get angry with God, because God knows I got angry, and He's listening now anyway. But He knew. And I've also learned that even more, and tell my congregations that you can't hide from God, so tell Him in the conversation, because He knows it already. And I think that's a big thing when you're struggling with this one. But I was angry because I remember saying out loud, Lord, you've dangled this carrot of ministry before me. I've fallen in love with it. Why are you taking it away? Why would you do that? And the answer, and I never like to say I heard God speak, because I think that sometimes can sound presumptuous, can't it? But I do believe I heard God speak, because He said, Sue, I am going to bless you through this. Now I know I heard Him speak, because I remember going, really? Really? Yes, my child, because I remember saying, how are you going to bless me through this? And He said, because I am about to reveal to you a side of me that you have never yet seen. Now, how can I not call that a blessing? To be told I'm going to see a side of our God that I haven't seen. And when I asked Him then, how? What does that mean? He said, well, it must have been a why. He said, because you've never had to rely on me before like this. You've never had to lean into me. So I'm going to show you a side that you've never seen. And that was amazing. It got tough. I'm not even going to pretend it didn't. I can never gloss over this. But then in June, Stuart caught COVID. He was so good that in May, we went abroad on holiday. Admittedly with my twin sister and husband, but he was still that good that he could go into a restaurant in Menorca. He didn't have to be taken anywhere like that. He was good. But in the June, we went away in our caravan as a practice run to see if we'd be okay on a bigger site in the summer. And on that Tuesday morning, my twin rang me, and Stuart, we were on loudspeaker, sitting at the roaches, looking across at the roaches. And she said, how are you doing, Stu? And he said, I'm happier than I can remember for a long time. It was that good. That afternoon, he caught COVID. Now, I don't know if you know, and this is worth knowing actually, we're all dementia people, aren't we? If you get COVID with dementia, it can be horrific. He got that. I took him to hospital on the Thursday night with a temperature of 105. And the following, I didn't know he got, none of us knew he had COVID, but they kept him in. And the consultant said to me on the Sunday morning, after we just thought he got COVID, there aren't 10 levels to dementia, Sue. But if there were, Stuart's jumped to the 10th level. Now, he said, we pray that he will come back down. He'll come to a different level, but he'll come down. And I remember him saying the words, God willing. And Stuart didn't. He's bucked the trend on that. He's never come down a scrap from that 10th level. But do you know what, folks? When God said that I was going to see a side of him that I've never seen, the children said, Mum, Dad's got, you're going to have, they never said Dad's got to go in a home, but they had been saying, Mum, we can't carry on like this, or you can't carry on. You're not going to be safe, Dad isn't going to be safe, and Mum, you look absolutely exhausted. And I said, it will never change. This will never change, because I will never ever say to your father, you're going to have to go into a home because I can't cope. And I honestly believe that by having COVID, that was taken away from me. I never made that decision. The hospital did. The hospital said he will never ever come home now, Sue, because they could see he wasn't getting better. And can you imagine the blessing to me of not living with guilt? And I'm not saying, if any of you forgive me, I'm not saying any of us should be guilty. Please, my mum had to go into a home. I lived with that guilt, the way it happened. But I've been spared that, and that's been absolutely enormous. Being spared that sense of making that decision. And there have been other things, and I've forgotten what I was going to say. They've been absolute. Oh, well, one massive one is, and I won't tell you the story behind it all because it's far too long. But Stuart's been found a nursing home in Trentham, and I can walk. That's so rare. It doesn't happen. You're given one, and it's miles away, and then you might not even like it. I love this place. It's run by an Asian family, and only the men can look after Stu. And he adores them, because in the Asian culture, for these Indian men, the most respected in their culture are the elderly, and they call him Papa Stewie. When I'm there and we're sitting on the sofa with one of his carers on the other side of him, and Stewie in the middle, and then me, he doesn't hold my hand. He chooses to hold the hand of a male an Indian man, a man who calls him Papa. So when I leave, there are no tears, ever. And if that isn't God showing me another side of himself, I don't know what is. I'm finishing now. This little sharp thing in my hand was what I preached on Sunday. And it's a mustard seed glued to a heart. And the lectionary reading, I'm sure you'll all know, as Laura Biding, Church of England lectionary followers, Jesus in the parable of the mustard seed, well, not the parable, the story of, sorry, it wasn't a parable, forgive me, it wasn't a parable, was it? Jesus saying, all you need is a faith the size of a mustard seed. And this, one of these, because all the congregation went out with one, but this is above my back door, blue tacked above the door. So when I put my key in the lock to go out through the door, I always use that mustard. Sometimes if my faith is only big enough, that size, whatever giant I'm going to face, whatever bad news, whatever, I know it only needs to be that big, and my huge, all-loving, all-powerful God will always be enough. It's not a sermon, so I won't say amen, but thank you for letting me share my story.